So long.
Click one, click two. Click top, click
That one?
bottom.
That
Yep. Yep.
Recording in progress.
Can you hear us now?
Chris,
Chris, can you hear us? Oh, there we go.
Roger.
Hello.
Roger Dodger.
Awesome. Welcome to the Economic Development Subcommittee meeting for July 20th, 2022.
Time being
Time being 5:50. I'd like to call the Economic Development Subcommittee to order. All citizens are welcome to attend public board and committee meetings in person. Additionally, in the effort to maximize citizen engagement opportunities, citizens will be able to continue to participate remotely via phone or Zoom. The meetings will also be live streamed by Franklin TV and shown on Comcast Channel 11 and Verizon Channel 29. The link to access the meeting is on the agenda, which is on the website, and the call-in number is 1-929-205-6099. The meeting ID number is 850-5254-3914, and then press the pound number. Thank you all for being here tonight. Happy July. It's pretty hot out there. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Urban Land Institute presentation that they gave us, because it was packed full of information.
Mm-hmm.
And I took one action item away from the
agenda.
presentation, and that was that we had already had to work on the biotech overlay zoning, and so I thought maybe we could talk about it a little bit tonight and see if there was any more information gleaned by the Institute, and if we could actually work on the biotech overlay. So I think I will throw it over to Jamie, or should we ask Jamie? Jamie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the subcommittee. It's a little bit of a rock and a hard place. I think overall, I think we came away with a couple details that were most germane. Number one, I think everything that was done is valuable information moving forward regardless. The part that honestly concerns me the most is the landowner buy-in. It's hard to make significant changes to a biotech corridor or the vision that Brian brought forward at maximizing that land in that area when the private landowners are, I think the study showed, were unanimously opposed to doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in terms of the bigger picture view, you know, I can't say I have an automatic solution to engage them. I know that the planning office and Brian have engaged them in the past, and I think there's been open minds, but I think that's probably the biggest barrier right now to any type of significant change that the Institute had proposed. And so if the landowners aren't engaged and on board, it's hard to develop a biotech corridor or even a retail, any business corridor. And so I think, you know, that's one issue. And then the second is, in absence of any effort to engage the landowners or try to talk to them in terms of trying to see the bigger view, you know, I think we're back to square one for the town in terms of what we own. And, you know, what are the options and what can we do to clean up the site, which you'll learn later when we talk about the fiscal forecast, and as we're going into the fiscal year, there will be a shock message sent that it's going to be very, very difficult to fund projects like this in an inflation environment. And so we have to also be cautious that if we ever did move forward with some sort of remediation or cleanup or grants, local funding, whatever it might be, any combination of it, you know, the value of what we thought was 500,000 to clean up a certain part of the site,
Yep.
you know, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, could be $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million, we don't know.
Easy.
I can base it, and you'll see it when the fiscal forecast comes out, but I can say that the bids we are now seeing over the last 30 to 60 days and going forward, the prices for any major project, construction project, good and certain, it's going to send a pretty big shockwave through the system. And the reality that a lot of services and projects we want to do just can't happen.
Yep.
So that's my only thought on that. Brian, do you have any other thoughts about where to go from here? You want to give us your technical expertise?
So while Brian gets ready to come in front of us, so Jamie, you mean that the landowners were not interested in Brian's idea of the road? Is that correct?
I believe that came out during the Institute presentation, that
Right.
the landowners are not interested in changing anything. Yep.
So you mean even their zoning? Like anything?
Yeah, I think they were opposed to anything. Which, you know, I mean, it's hard to say. It's just, you know, I don't, it may have been the format, maybe it was the interviewees, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
So maybe their minds could get changed.
All right.
We'd have to find out.
Well, maybe Brian has some other input.
Just a quick
Glenn?
question.
Counselor
The
Jones?
zoning, correct me if I'm wrong, is within our purview anyways, so even if they didn't, we could still choose to go forth with making either overlay changes or zoning changes on our behalf, regardless of what the property owners want to do anyways, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
That's
it's-
correct.
It's
That's
just kind
correct.
of, the reason I mention that, A, is for our newer councilors, and B, just so people understand that regardless of what the property owners may or not wish to do with their property, we as the town of Franklin have the right to change zoning as we so think will best benefit the community as a whole. Am I wrong, Brian?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You are correct, Counselor Jones.
Thank you. I just wanted-
And I
just
think,
wanted to-
I think it would probably make that property worth more. But anyways, let's throw it over to Brian and he can,
All right. Well, first of all, I really appreciate the Urban Land Institute coming out. Mostly it was mass development that they paid for this thing to happen. I think it was great that they did that. And during the project, I gave them information and I stood back and I let them do their job. So that's fine. And as it turned out, that night when they were doing their presentation, I couldn't actually be here. So when so it was actually pretty interesting when I watched the video and you know, the presentation, and I'm like, really? It was kind of surprising to me
Yeah.
what they, you know, so which is good. I mean, it made me think about a few things. For one thing, we had a presentation, that we had a concept where we put in a road from one road to another connected, and everybody benefits and a whole deal. And that's a concept out there that whether it would happen or not, it's up to the actual property owners to, you know, to go in with the town and actually make something like that happen.
right, this is the
Correct,
the
yes, yeah.
map.
And, exactly. And so if that doesn't happen, at a minimum, the town needs to clean up their property, right? And the hope was that by cleaning up the property, utilizing for an access road, everybody that project touched would benefit one way or the other. Right now, there are 3 property owners without frontage. They can't do anything. They can't redevelop those properties. And if we just say, okay, no road, and we're just gonna deal with New Style, then they can't do anything with their property. It's not gonna revitalize that area, no matter
Right.
what. So,
Right.
so the issue was not just clean up New Style, but revitalize the North Grove Street Economic Opportunity Area and Priority Development Area. So that in itself, by backing away from the road and just focusing on Grove Street, is not gonna accomplish that. I think that in the proposal that they had, in the recommendations, was to purchase one property and do a land swap
swap.
with others.
Right, yep,
And that's fine, but that means that the town is taking over one of the most contaminated sites possibly the region.
Right.
One of the properties, and, you know, and they're doing a land swap, so property owners are gonna benefit, but the town takes on a lot more liability and responsibility and
Okay.
cost. And if, you know, if there's somebody out there that wants to give the town millions to do something like that, that's great, but you have to fund something like this, I think that you're, if you're not gonna go with a redevelopment of the region in a neighborhood,
Yeah.
then focus on new styling and get us out of the brownfield business essentially, by cleaning that up. And that's the only way to do that, well, two ways. We fund it ourselves, which is probably not gonna happen, or apply for grants, which we're working on. We'll continue working in that direction. What's interesting is I know that, I did talk to one of the property owners since then, even before I looked at the presentation and everything really, and I said, how's it go? You know, what do you think? Oh, well, I'm talking to so-and-so about a certain thing. And I'm like, okay, good luck to you, you know, whatever. And it really was like not excited about going forward with this project. It was going in another direction with something. So that's fine. But I think the concept of revitalizing that area is only going to happen if these people that don't have access, they don't have frontage, they can't do anything with their property. If that stays like that, you're always going to have a messy area. You're always going to have that. Even if our property gets cleaned up and it's a clean slate, which can be developed, but it's a very small parcel in itself,
Right.
obviously.
Right.
You
Right.
can't do a whole lot with it. And if you ever build anything there, they're gonna be, you know, the remediation, the mitigation essentially that they need to do, put any building there is significant. So, unless it's gonna be a parking lot, and that's fine too. But spending a lot of money for a parking lot seems to me,
So so one of the things I have a question about was that one of the presenters mentioned that the town had already done a lot of removal or remediation of some of the hazardous chemicals, and that what was left wasn't really that bad. Is that?
we don't actually know that. We don't actually know that. We know that on our parcel, there is more contamination. We know that under the building in the back that has fallen down,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's likely contamination right there. There's also likely contamination on adjacent properties. Whether it occurred on our town property and went off-site or the other way around, we actually don't know that. So we need to do environmental assessment work, actually sticking more wells in the ground, figuring out what to do. Removing the building has to be demolished and removed, put wells right there, probably remove more soil. So you're talking $500,000 to $1 million. I have no idea at this point, like Jamie was saying, the costs are so crazy.
Right.
So without getting EPA grants, for instance, I think that site's gonna be like that for a while.
Yeah.
So even if somebody were to buy that, what are they gonna do with it? I mean, we actually had put out that RFP a few years ago. We had the adjacent property owner say, yeah, I'll take it for practically nothing. They worked on it, and then they didn't do
They
anything
didn't
with
take
it. It comes back to us.
Right.
Their costs would have been less than maybe the town's, but it still would have been a lot of money. And
Do you mean the cost of remediation would have
Cost
been less?
the cost to remediate and to
Yes.
reuse that property,
Just want to,
it would have been a little less possibly because they don't have to pay, certain costs associated with the community doing this.
okay.
But anyway, so my thought is that I'm going to continue working on the brownfield aspects of it and try to get some grants. And by 6 months, a year from now, we might have some funding. We might be able to continue with remediation. If something happens in the meantime, something else comes up where adjacent property owners are saying they want to go forward and do something else, then we can talk about that also.
Okay.
But either way, we need to focus on the responsibility of cleaning that property up. It is stuck with the town. It's not, nobody else is gonna do it unless we give them the thing and hope, and they have some kind of benefit out of it. They can see that, okay, if they spend $500,000 and get a clean property, maybe they're gonna say, hey, that's great. But why would they want it when they can go buy another, spend $500,000 to buy another property?
Right.
Anybody who buys that is asking for trouble essentially, unless they have a benefit to cleaning it up, where the adjacent property owners do have that benefit,
Right.
because they can redevelop or develop their properties. They can get access to it through that, that property.
Right, so it gives it road frontage so that they can access their
Yep.
property.
Right, if they were, if one person bought our property and 3 or 4 other properties in that area, put it all together, put in a subdivision road, they could get a commercial subdivision in
Yeah.
there. Even if they
Okay.
didn't go all the way to Forge Park, they could actually develop a substantial amount of that area, redevelop it, and so, yeah.
So do you think then that the biotech overlay to add that property wouldn't add any benefit until someone else bought the property?
The biotech overlay is good, but one thing you have to understand is, we haven't actually used our biotech overlay yet. And the reason is, because a biotech overlay comes in once you get biotech research in a certain, manufacturing in a certain level. We
Okay.
have a lot of biotech that has happened in this town which never reached that level,
Mhm.
and it happened all over the town.
Right.
In any industrial area, you can have research, manufacturing, up to a certain level. And it's happening. We have it in town this minute. We have several companies doing biotech, research, manufacturing.
Right, do you
So-
mean, can I interrupt you for a
Yeah,
second?
go ahead.
Do you mean biosafety level?
Correct,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, the containment. I mean, if you
Yeah,
get up to
I-
a certain level where you need to contain a certain, that's when you need that biotech
Right.
overlay district.
Yeah. I
But
just
you
wanna
can do
clarify.
other stuff up to that, above that, but once you get above that, and we don't allow a level of 4, which in town at all. So it's only level 3
Three.
that this applies to.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Level 1 and 2, they're already doing in town,
Okay,
okay? So if you change the zone, it used to be an industrial zone. Before I came here, they rezoned that to industrial. It was industrial, they rezoned to business, because
Mhm.
they wanted to kind of zone up the area so, some things could happen there. And instead of it looking more industrial, looking and ratty, they wanted businesses to move in and clean the place up. It hasn't happened, and not a lot. I mean, it happened a little bit maybe, but it is approved a little bit in a couple of ways. But in general, so you can work on rezoning that area, whether you have it in the biotech zone or not, doesn't matter to me, but you can do that. You extend the industrial over a little bit more if you wanted to, like it used to be, and go back in that direction, or you can come up with a new zone. But as far as the zoning, that's not an issue in my mind.
Okay.
Once the property's clean, right?
Yeah.
And once people have access to their properties in the back, that place will develop whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
It's just, there's
Right.
gotta be development,
Okay.
Right.
all right,
right? So,
Yep.
Anyway.
I get it. Thank you, Brian. Counselor Jones?
Thank you, Mel. I think everyone's pretty clear on the fact that New Style in and of itself is a Pandora's box. You know, it's just kind of one of those pieces of properties that the town unfortunately had to take possession of by a tax taking. And it's almost like walking through a minefield. You don't know where those spots of hazardous chemicals and toxins are. If we go, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, if we go and actually try to clean it up, we could actually be posing even more of a potential environmental risk, because we could accidentally come across a spot that is, for all intents and purposes, ridiculously contaminated. And Minebrook has already had some level of contamination in it from that property. I don't disagree with you in the fact that we need to address cleaning up the piece of property. But what I'm concerned about right now, and this really kind of goes back to Jamie's point, is just the overall cost. It's exuberant. And we are just, at the moment, with inflation kind of going in the direction it's going, we're not really in a position to tackle such a large project. But, as Brian stated, if we can get grants, if we can get the EPA grants, and I guess what my question is what is the likelihood, because it's been years that we've been talking about this, that we can actually get an EPA grant or a government grant or some kind of funding that will help us mitigate the cost associated with cleaning up that Newstown property.
There is more EPA money this year than last or the year before, substantially more than 5 years ago. Okay, so because of the money that was pumped into capital, federal capital, there is money in the EPA. And I have a consultant who's an LSP, a licensed site professional, who has agreed to do us a favor, if you will, to work with us and to create and to develop a brownfield application, which would go in, probably end up in the fall. It would go in for that round of funding. We'd know for a few months after that whether we received it. And in addition to that, there is a targeted assessment program, which I'll be applying for also, so that it's smaller amounts of money. But that would be if we did get both of them, first one would give us do some more assessment. I don't know if it would get the building down or not. And the brownfield grant would do the rest of the work. The first grant, I don't believe is a local match requirement, but there might be a little bit. The second one is a 20% usually on a federal grant. So if you get $500,000 grant, which the amounts used to be 200 max, they've increased them substantially now. So if you get a $500,000 grant, you have to come up with the additional $100,000 to pull that project off. So that would be when I would come back and say, we need money. I'd talk to Jamie to see if we can somehow come up with that kind of money to do that project. But I don't see the town spending more than that on this project in the near future. I don't see it possible. There's so many needs right now. And if we were to say, okay, we're going to appropriate $250,000 and put it, it's still not going to get you to clean property.
Right.
Right? So why would you do that this minute? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
But if anybody has any deep pockets and they want to help us out, great. But otherwise, it's just not going to happen.
Mega Millions is up to 600,000.
That's true.
600
That's
million,
true.
so
I got a
maybe
couple of tickets.
we'll see what happens.
I think the fact that you have a,
I just wanted to finish.
oh, sorry, you still have the floor. I'm sorry, Counselor Jones.
That's okay. I think to Brian's point, and in my last statement I'll make before I give the floor back, is just simply state that based on the information that we've been given, and based on the current situation, and based on Brian's recommendations, is to simply just kind of hold off doing anything for some time on our end of things until Brian can potentially do some more digging on the grant side of things and the brownfield side of things to see if there is a potential that we can get some additional funding. Simply because I don't think the town, we as the town of Franklin, are currently in a state of being able to just throw money at what could be a perpetual nightmare.
You're not going to go dig there.
Hmm?
You said you wanted to dig more. No digging.
No digging. But that's my final statement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Jones. I think the fact that we have the potential now, you have a friend in the EPA that could help us work on the brownfield, I think that's really a big positive. I think it's like the most positive thing.
I have another friend that I had talked about earlier. I haven't talked about any friends in the EPA.
Okay, all right. Or you have a friend that will help you put together the proposal.
Correct.
I think that is probably the most positive thing I've heard so far. So that's great. Does anyone have any questions for Brian? Kobe? Councilor Frangillo?
What is thank you, Maria. What is the value of this property if it were clean? Do we
If it
have-
were clean,
Yeah.
if it never was contaminated, it would be worth $250,000 or something. I don't really know, whatever the value of that property is. But if it were to be cleaned up to the likelihood it's not going to be cleaned up so you can build a house there or fully clean property, we'll clean it up to the point where you can use it for a parking lot or something like that. So what is it worth to anybody to buy a property like that? All you can do is maybe you can put a commercial building on it, let's just say, or industrial, and you put the under the building, there are ways to get the vapor from not building up.
Yep.
But basically, it's the same thing as putting radon, a fan in your cellar to get clean, make sure the air is clean. It's the same idea. So you can put those type of things in there, but when there's other properties that can be developed for the same kind of reasons, why would the person choose there? That property itself, next to the railroad tracks, is gonna have issues with site distance. It's got, there's a lot of different things that that property has that the normal developer is not gonna really want. If they can get it for $1, $100, $20,000, whatever, maybe somebody wants to build there, but it's not gonna net the town a whole lot of money. We've already put in hundreds of thousands. We'll never get that back on a property like that. And if we invest another 100,000, I don't expect we'd get 100,000 back. But we need to clean it up either way. So, even if the value is gonna be $1 when you're done with it, we need to get it cleaned up somehow.
Can Jamie has his hand up. You want to answer Council Frangilla's question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So through you, Madam Chair, to Councilor Frangillo, the last assessment was done about a year ago from our assessors, and the value right now on the property card is, for the total parcel, is $407,300. That's contaminated. So the land value is $360,000, and the building value is about $47,000. I see Brian laughing because I smirked too, saying, how could that building be worth anything? But it is a structure with materials, with an approved, with a defined footprint. So to Brian's point, there is a value in that because there's rules under ZBA and Planning Board that could have a position where that footprint is by right again, and could be, So when we look at value, it's part art, part science, but a contaminated site at $360,500 of land value, I think gets to your point, Council Frangillo, of like, if it was clean, what would it be worth? Well, why is it worth this much right now? Likely because of the location.
Yeah.
And I think that came out in the study, in the presentation. So, we're not gonna make up numbers and say, oh, it could be worth this, but I think you see at least a valuable piece of land for the town of Franklin if it was clean. That if you were to sell it off for commercial industrial, it could be a good return on investment for the town. I don't know. Could be a parking lot. That's obviously a different valuation and a different use. But if the town were to go out and sell it on the private market, which we've already RFP'd once as a contaminated site, didn't really get any takers. If it was a clean site, you got to look out 10 years as well. If you started investing in it within a couple years, it's still going to take years to clean up and go through all that. So, and at the end of the decade, you'd have to say to yourself, well, where's the value and property of Franklin? You could have $1 million parcel.
Right.
I'm missing the disconnect between their optimism around the value of the property and your pessimism.
And what I'm saying?
Is it just that
Yeah.
they only got to spend a day and they didn't have to think about it and they
No,
they get
listen,
paid
if
to
it
sound good?
were clean, and it could be developed for whatever reason, it's worth a substantial amount of money.
But they knew all that.
But that is not, what they looked at is a concept that would be to join that property with the next property, clean them both up, and redevelop the site. Okay, that, obviously, first of all, if the town does it, we're taking over one of the more contaminated sites in the town, and I don't recommend it. We don't, maybe you want to do that, but I wouldn't go recommending that. But, redevelopment authorities in cities and stuff, that's what they do. They oh, this site's terrible, this site's terrible, put them together, buy them, clean them up, sell it off to try to get a new developer in there. But this is a marginal property to begin with, being next to the tracks. You have Mine Brook next to it. There's going to be setbacks and on a lot of different, a lot of different directions, a lot of different things. You're not going to get much in there. But if you did do that, you'd be investing a lot of money.
With hopes.
First of all, the cost of one of the properties, whether you're getting the one to the south of Mine Brook and then swapping, you're investing that kind of a development. That's going to cost a lot of money to do anything like that. and then the cleanup, get the site ready for development, and then do an RFP or whatever, or line up developers. You can go out and do things in a different way. But my thought is that value of that property is relatively small. It's one of the least valuable industrial, commercial type of properties we have in town, because of the contamination problems that we have. And after you clean it up the best you can, you're not going to have an average commercial property there. You're never going to get to that point, because there's the contamination in that ground. We have a lot of wells there. You put the bedrock wells, and then you have the ground, the shallow wells. They all say that we have problems there. So the contamination starts here. Somebody messes up, it goes into the ground, gets into the groundwater, spreads out, keeps going down to the cracks, and before you know it, it is spread out all over the place. If the contamination happened on an adjacent property, the same thing would happen, and we might be contaminated from them.
That's what I was
We
gonna
don't
ask.
know where all the contamination started and where it's gone. And that is, without knowing that information,
Yeah,
we will never be able to develop the property.
Right.
Never. It just will not be a developed property. So the extent of contamination is unknown. So obviously the building that's there has to go away, and you need to actually assess that area. And if we assess it and we understand, if the adjacent property owners don't want us to put a well next to on their property, we may never know if the contamination started on their property. There's a lot of issues here, right? So I don't believe it's a valuable property, and it ever really will be in my mind. But if it could be worth $500,000 someday, then great. I would applaud the town if we could sell it for anything like that. That would be great. But I personally believe that over the near future, if we get it cleaned up, it won't sell for a very healthy dollar amount. So that's my own opinion. I'm not a realtor, and we would obviously bring people in to do assessments like that at a time like that.
The other question I had, you touched upon, which is that it seems like the other advantage we have compared to a private developer is the amount of federal and state money toward cleaning up contamination like this,
Absolutely.
and some expertise or experience applying for such grants. It seems, I don't know, I guess maybe I'm desperately trying to hold on to their optimism, but it seems like location, like it's right by 495, 140, the ceiling should be pretty high on what that could potentially be worth. And the possibility of us not having to really spend any of our own money. It might take time, but not really spend any of our own money because of the interest of everyone in cleaning that up. That equation makes it worthwhile. And if that can be expedited by putting the two properties together, and really allowing us to control that whole building, that seems worthwhile.
Quick thought,
Jamie.
through you, Madam Chair. The disadvantage to us doing it is that it will take exponentially longer, and the town has to pay prevailing wage. So you're at a 35% markup average right there, right? So applying for grants, you apply for one, you get one, you miss the next two rounds, you get a third, you're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years longer. We've already, Brian, we've had the parcel since 2002.
Yep, 18, 24, yeah. 20.
And, I think that was the idea behind the original RFP, was to get any bidders out there. And maybe we didn't, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, the advantages, I like the fact that you're trying to maintain optimism. I didn't want to put a damper on it with prevailing wage, but that does jack up the cost significantly. And it does make it more complicated because of procurement and all the rules and laws that public officials have to follow, whereas the private sector doesn't have to follow all that stuff. And, I think those are substantial factors. I think maybe it's not something to decide today, but maybe the town should put out the land again for bid. Do we really have a use there? Do we want to have a use? Are we assuming it has to be something municipal? Could be. Could be a DPW snowbank. I don't know. I'm just, I think we'd have to find out if there's a municipal use to say, well, that's where we're going to do A, B, and C, and that's something we really want to do and need, and then try to figure out the finances after that as well. But despite the advantages of the grants and not having to possibly invest local dollars, the prevailing wage and the timeline are going to be problems too.
Okay, my final clarifying question would just be that your recommendation is put as little money into it as possible and continue to chip away at possibly getting federal grants on the current property. Just don't expand, don't do anything bigger than we're doing. Just sit, hope that we get federal money, or hope that something else comes up.
I don't know, I mean, yes, that is basically my thought process, because of a lot of different things out there right now. But I don't recommend buying that property additionally. I don't. I think it probably has more problems than our property itself, number one. It was used as a garage back in the automotives, back in the 70s. All the solvents that were dumped into the ground and all of that is likely sitting there right now. It's used for granite processing right now. At one point, they clogged up the sewer line. I mean, there was building issues. There's a lot of stuff going on there. So if you demolish 2 buildings, the whole thing, clean up the whole site, you may have a valuable property there. But does this town want to spend the money and do that? I don't know. I mean, that has to be a priority of council, not my priority. I can only tell you that the immediate future, my thought is I will continue working on funds. If you have you want to go change the direction and do something else, I'll do whatever the council tells me to, or Jamie tells me to do. But that's not something that I would highly recommend right now. But it's, look, if you want, we come back and sit down 3 to 6 months again, and we talk about New Style again and see how we're doing.
Yeah, I don't think it's
right?
going to go away.
To 20 years.
Either way, it's not going away.
One of the things that the Land Institute recommended was to have a private broker, like to try to sell it. So when Jamie was talking about putting out an RFP, I think maybe that would never work. That might not work again, but definitely to have someone else to help us. I think once it gets cleaned up, then it would be worth it. If
Yeah,
it ever gets cleaned up.
Yeah, their recommendation, once it was all done,
Yeah,
get a private broker.
right.
And
So-
that's fine. And that's something you talk to Jamie or Mark Sorrell about in the future, about something like that. But
There's a battery that's low somewhere, but. I have a question about when you said wells. So there's wells, you mean testing wells on the property?
Yes.
And so then you can only get a certain distance away from the property line to test?
no, we can put all the wells we want on our property, but
Okay.
it does not mean, if something shows up in that well, that was contamination in the well, where did it come from? Was it there, or was it here, or was it on the other property? We don't know. So you have to put in multiple wells in multiple locations to see, okay, is the contamination really bad here, and eventually it's not too bad?
Right,
That's what they're looking for when they do these assessments.
okay. So
If
they're looking for a gradient of contamination.
Call it that way, yeah. Basically, where did it start is very difficult. All we know is that we have contamination on our site. And if we're allowed to put wells next door, and it's more contamination next door, then we can assume it's coming from them.
Right.
But, you know, whether the property owners
Nobody
want to
wants
do
to
that,
do it.
it's not likely they want to do that. We have to focus on our own property.
Right, thank you, Brian. I think Counselor Jones had a question in his hand.
Actually, Patrick, did you want to say something?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, Patrick, Counselor Sheridan.
So I drove up Old Forge Road, is that what the other property owners? Those,
Old Forge Road?
Yes.
Yeah.
there's residents living there,
Yep.
are they safe?
As far as we know, they are safe.
Are
but
they the
we-
ones that own the land, they're the other property owners, right?
That's correct. Through Madam Chair, the landowners that Councilor Sheridan is referencing, they are, as far as I know, safe.
They have city water, I hope, right?
I don't know about that. We had some issues years ago with snow removal and some stuff like that. We worked that out. But when you drove up there, you can see the world growing around,
Yeah.
building up and around where they're living. And I think those are the residents that were referenced in the study as the ones opposed to making any changes.
Are they, now, do the owners live there, do we know, or are they rental?
I believe, yeah, they live there.
They live there?
At least two of the three. I don't know about the third, but I'm pretty sure they
Well,
live there.
one residence lives there.
Okay.
And the other properties are more commercial industrial. And then to the south of the site, there is another property there that, I mean, it's a little bit, it's 100 yards from our property, so I don't really count that in as a part of the project, but there is another residence.
Karate school wouldn't be part of the project, the karate place?
Well, the karate place probably has some contamination
Yeah.
on it, but that used to be part of the New Style property.
Okay.
So I don't know whether the New Style company or other companies that own that contaminated that, or the contamination came from
Okay.
our property, or even from the other property north of us, so we don't really know.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Counselor Jones.
Yep. Just a quick comment. It's relative, slightly adjacent piece of property, but has there been any other further discussion about the potential of approaching the state on the DPW lot that immediately is, they have their highway department building and
Oh,
structures right at the intersection of,
Mass Highways.
yeah, the mass
property.
highways, yeah.
No, I don't know if anybody has talked to them lately. I know that Jeff Nutting many years ago did, but I don't know if Jamie's been involved.
Jeff Nutting, Jamie Helen, Brutus Cannareggi, Carlos Rebello. You know, I think there's been a lot of people who've made, Jeff Roy, Jim Valley, I think there's a lot of people that have tried to get that cleaned up a little bit. We've also tried some other sites. At the end of the day, I think it's just about bandwidth at the state level. I mean, we get a lot of complaints of staging areas right off exit 16 as well, because the state owns that land. The Commonwealth actually owns a piece of land right at where you were talking, at Old Forge Road, right, or Old
Yeah.
Grove, right there. So they own a lot of land. We've tried to get them to kind of clean up a few sites, and it's been modest success at best.
I'm not even really concerned about cleaning it up. I'm more concerned about them just giving it to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve's laughing. I laugh because I
Well-
laugh at too.
You can, next, whoever wins the next governorship,
Uh-huh.
maybe we can write a letter and see what
Good
happens.
question.
Talk to Rep. Roy about it, see what he can do.
I mean, really, what I think this boils down to is the fact that we have some major issues right there on Grove Street. Obviously, our New Style property as well as other properties. The fact is that we have a portion of what is, for all intents and purposes, could be a potentially desirable location to build, whether it be hotels, industrial, commercial type properties, right there at exit 17. I'm gonna call it exit 17. That, for all intents and
Old-
purposes,
old
is,
exit.
I'm calling it 17. I don't care. People change it too. But the fact is that we are quite literally, potentially, if the pieces were rearranged in a slightly different order, that could be just as a popular location as Stop and Shop in the Franklin Village Plaza
Right.
and industrial parks. But this is just gonna take a little bit of politics and B, a little bit of time and money to just finally get this corner in this area of exit 17 cleaned up.
Yeah.
I
Old
that,
exit.
oh, 17, damn it, I'm gonna talk to 7. Is that, it just, I still despite the issues that are associated with this area, I still have, I guess the best word to use is hope. And I don't think we should give up trying to kind of clean up and fix up
Yeah.
exit 17. It's just something, what's that?
Like Star Wars.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
it's just my thoughts. It's a long-term thought, it's a long-term goal, but I do think it's feasible.
I agree with you, Counselor Jones, that we need to have hope.
Tom, did you get that?
And that this is like a big step. I mean, I've been paying attention to this for, I don't know how many years now. How long have I been? 5 or something? I mean, it seemed pretty unsolvable, this problem, but I feel like maybe we can if we keep working at it. And so, so Brian, keep trying to get those grants and get that thing together. And maybe we should revisit this
6 months.
6 months, 3 to 6 months. Jamie, what do you think? Should we?
I was just gonna ask Brian, you know, what, Alicia just looked it up too. What's the cycle of the grant round for the
Yeah.
brownfields?
EPA brownfields are, I know.
You just
it's-
had it with DEP up on your phone.
Oh, DEP.
Oh, look at, she's got it right there. Well, there's a DEP the same thing, but the DEP memo, you know, while we were talking, we were looking it up.
Yeah.
I just think we find out that cycle.
Yeah.
I think we do what we normally do, which is we apply for grants and we let Rep. Roy and Senator Spilka and Senator Roush know about them, so they write their letters.
Right.
And maybe we just come back after that next brownfields grant round and say, you know, how did we do? And, you know, it could be 6-8 months from now, I don't know. But maybe we come back after the brownfields grant round?
Yeah. And what else do we need to do? Or like if we don't get the grant, like what else do we need to do to show that we have to clean this up.
Eventually, yep.
Yeah. So,
And I think we also I think at some point we are gonna need some partnership and cooperation from the abutters, because, you know,
Seems
there's
like
the
it.
business on the one side of us, but on the other side of the tracks, there's town-owned land, and then there's the few residents that live back there.
Yeah.
They're very awkward shaped parcels with awkward wetland delineations that make it very difficult to do anything, and the train runs right through it, the tracks, right?
yep.
And so I think at some point too, even if we got the money and cleaned up our piece, to Brian's point a moment ago, there's still other pieces, and Mine Brook, that are gonna have to be dealt with by those landowners as well, including the Commonwealth, everybody.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think we can do our part, to your point, Madam Chair, and then eventually we're gonna have to ask other people to step up too.
Definitely, because one of the things I worry about is if we get our area cleaned up, then it gets contaminated again from
Yeah.
maybe the original area where this contamination is coming from, if it's not from our property.
Yeah.
So that worries me too. So we really need to understand more about where it is.
Yeah.
Is what I'm taking away now. But we're gonna have hope, right?
If it's not the last hope.
It's not the last hope.
So,
Would you like to say something?
It's these 2 cents.
perfect.
Yes. Anyone in the audience would like to stand up, please state your name and your address.
Oh, it was actually.
Steve Sherlock, 10 Lawrence Drive, as the representative citizen, listening to the discussion tonight and clearly having spent some time since 2008 with this property and its various iterations. It's expensive, it's complex, with lack of cooperation, there's very little, as already has been said, that we can really do. I agree, going forward, continue to get some grants. That cycle is what it is, that'll happen. I would also consider, and being mindful of whatever resources on the town side it would take to put an RFI, RFP together again, because our resources drive that as well. And if we don't have enough time to do so, because we've already got a few things on our plate,
Yes.
at least that would kind of help and give us an increase in the hope, so that if somebody all of a sudden says, hey, because values are going up, land is not generally available, but, oh, by the way, if this is here and we take this and put parcels together, clearly it's gonna take some money, but if somebody somewhere comes along, let's at least create the awareness that, oh, by the way, there's something here, you might have to fix it, but there's an option. So to that, I'd have some hope. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sherlock. I mean, I think it is good for people to see this study from the Land Institute as well, and to know that there's a possibility that people are thinking outside the box and they're coming up with solutions to this. And maybe someone will say, okay, I'm gonna do it, because, I mean, I guess we can hope.
At this
Maintain the
point-
optimism.
At this point, I think that's probably all we have.
Just really quickly, Madam Chair,
Yes,
Alicia
Jim.
did look up, last year's grant round opened in December and then concluded in the spring. So I think that's probably, my guess would be is,
December.
although that, it might,
Was that DEP or EPA?
DEP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
EPA has more money and they're a little bit earlier in the year,
Yeah.
but that's.
Okay.
So
All
I
right.
think we're a year out from probably seeing what the grant rounds come up with, if anything, and then we'll probably take
Okay.
it from there.
All right, does that sound good, everyone? Everyone is okay?
They don't come back for another year?
Yep.
Probably spring.
If I heard you correctly.
Yeah, I think, you think a year, Jamie?
Yeah, because I think Brian's talking about one round of EPA, we're talking about DEP. If DEP's done in March or April,
Okay,
they're paid out in May.
Right.
So,
That's next year.
Yeah.
you know,
right, so next, early spring.
it would be June.
Late spring.
Yeah.
Well, we would have the money in June, but we would need to, like,
Early summer.
plan and, like, talk
Right.
about it, right?
Right.
And if Brian has any inquiries, or anyone has
Friends.
changed their minds, like, maybe maybe, you know, I think the more we talk about it, maybe the more people will think, like, maybe we should do something about it, so, hopefully someone else will, maybe one of the landowners will say, okay, let's do something about this.
Maybe.
Yes. And so thank you very much, Brian and Jamie and Alicia, for being here and helping us with this. And I think I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you all.
The rotunda there, the stained glass, I shouldn't say plate glass. You're never going to take it off the brass bridge abutments on every bridge in the Commonwealth that has been built in the last many, many decades, right? This is going to be a part of history, just like the Paul Revere, just like the original Massachusetts Company. You're going to see a story being told as it changes over time. It's not going to be erased. And the fact that Native people are finally, after 400 years of their images being used as our symbol, you know, in a state that is named after one of their tribal nations that no longer has a single acre of land to their name, Massachusetts tribe of Ponkapaw. The fact that we're finally consulting with them, I think that is a very healthy thing, and I don't think that it's going to result in the erasure of Native identity